Film Festival unveiled their films for the 2020 edition, which is probably going to be virtual, but they're also going to have some outdoorsy events. Kevin Jagernauth, are we excited about the titles that they released? And again, a festival that adheres to a slimmed down festival lineup strategy.
Yeah, I think this year it's been tricky for all the festivals to find films that are available and select a lineup that also generates excitement. But I think what the New York Film Festival has done this year is more than ever take a really curatorial approach, and they've cherry picked some really interesting titles uh, from Berlin and Sundance. A little bit from Cannes, and they have a few premieres as well. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting lineup. I think it's harder for them given they are following Venice and TIFF, and Telluride's already unveiled their selection. So they had a bigger hill to climb to make an impact, but I think they did a good job.
Dennis Lim and Eugene Hernandez, this is officially their first as toppers of the festival. And like you said, a lot of these films are cherry picked from Sundance, from Berlin, and so you feel as if perhaps it's a COVID, but perhaps there really is a new philosophy about curation and them having a much more larger scope, and not being afraid to take films that actually had their North American or American premiere in the US back in January. What's fun about this edition is that the closing film is actually something that we won't be seeing at the other fests, and that's French Exit. I'm a huge fan of the novel by Patrick DeWitt, and it's Azizel Jacobs. I want to say larger indie production. The movie was filmed in Montreal, stars Michelle Pfeiffer and Lucas Hedges, and it perhaps is a nice way to conclude the festival. A little bit of dark humor, noir humor, and potentially some Oscar award-worthy buzz on this tandem. So what were your thoughts about them being able to include something that's going to be a world premiere, and that does something positive for Sony Pictures Classics?
Yeah, I think I think every festival this year, they're choosing from a smaller number of films. It's probably very difficult to get something that you can call your own to world premiere, but it's certainly a boost for this filmmaker, for this film, and for Sony Pictures Classics. As you mentioned, this could be one that very easily becomes a centerpiece of whatever this award season turns out to be. And it's a big step up for the director whose previous film was a much smaller scale, The Lovers, and he's done some TV episodes as well in between his features. So this is, even in a pandemic year, this is a really nice profile boost for the filmmaker.
I wanted to, before we skip on to the next point, there's two films that sort of stuck out and are sort of confirming the idea that there could be momentum behind them. One of them is The Disciple by Chaitanya Tahane, and this filmmaker gave us court. I believe it was a director's fortnight film, but probably a certain regard film a couple of years back at the Cannes Film Festival. And this is his sophomore feature. It was selected for Venice, selected for TIFF, EP'd by Alfonso Cuarón. Yeah, I'm just really excited about this title. An Indian filmmaker, obviously not in the Bollywood strand. And another filmmaker that was selected for Cannes, San Sebastian, and TIFF is called Beginning. It's a first-time female filmmaker, and I'm going to screw up her name, but her name is Dia Kaluuya Ashevili, and essentially the story is set in a remote Georgian village, and it posits sort of like a whole bunch of there's like a chain reaction with a certain like technology that gets involved in unveiling a certain violent offense and truth. So yeah, those are two films that sort of like when we get to the fourth film in the fall festival lineup, and that's excluding San Sebastian, sort of like see, oh, okay, there's connections to this filmmaker, and this filmmaker obviously has left an impression. And so yeah, I think Cameron Bailey had spoken very highly of the Disciples filmmaker beforehand with Court, and so these are two filmmakers that these are two films that I'm really looking forward to seeing, either screener-wise or just like seeing the critical reaction.
Yeah, great choices. I mean, these are the kinds of films that, you and I, we dig through the lineups for. So I'm really glad you called them out, because I'm gonna put them on my radar now.
Really exciting news. Lulu Wang is going to potentially be making. I don't want to call it a remake because she doesn't see it as a remake, but the stars appear to have aligned for her to visit Hirokazu Kurida's film, and she's got the supportive focus features behind her. Kevin, I don't know about you, but I'm just ecstatic at seeing the filmmaker of The Farewell potentially taking on subject matter, and then again representing a community that doesn't appear really in, I want to say, indie mainstream.
Yeah, no, it's so the word has sort of snuck out that she'll be taking on like Father Like Son, and this is a film that um actually has been in the works for a while. So circa Cannes 2013, 2014, I believe it was 2013. The film played at the festival, and Steven Spielberg was the jury president. And not long after, it was announced that DreamWorks had optioned the film, that he was going to be involved in the remake. And at one point, Chris Weitz was attached, I believe, and then it went away. But I think this news is far more exciting. As you mentioned, Lulu Wang has said that, a little cryptically, that she doesn't believe in remakes. So it suggests that she's going to put her own stamp on the general premise of the film.
So the idea is that the option rights would have, Spielberg would have let the option rights run out, and I imagine via the Japanese production company, sales company, then talks, she would have had those talks, or a producer set would have then approached them and said, hey, I want to take this project over. I believe we both saw it at Cannes together.
You probably did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for Coreda, that was the film they made before The Shoplifters, which was a huge second win in a career that spanned since the late 80s, I want to say. For this, the screenwriter is actually Sarah Rule. She's a playwright, and she wrote The Glorias, which you would not have seen yet because that appeared at Sundance. What's your take on this being a uniquely, I don't want to say female perspective, but having a certain potential female gaze or female voice to a family situation like Father Like Son, which...
I mean, we don't know what Lulu Wang is going to do with the material. If I were to take a long shot prediction, my guess is that, she will tell this story, maybe not from the perspective of a a father and child, but maybe a mother and daughter.
Hmm.
That kind of relationship. And I mean, Hirokazu Koreeda, the playlist interviewed him circa Ken and asked him about the remake. And, at the time Spielberg was involved, he said he would have no involvement, and he was happy to see, someone else take it and then bring another perspective to the story. And so I think for me, that's still the most exciting option and the most exciting way to do this, which is to take it, but make it your own, and tell that story through your own perspective, your own experience, your own lens. So yeah, I think it's an interesting duo. I think they're both, rising director, rising screenwriter, and it could be a very potent outcome.
Cool. Well, let's hope that we hear of further news on this project sometime this year. Um, Ben Affleck is going to Chinatown, a project that, for any cinephile, is like Christmas morning in a way. So yeah, The Big Goodbye, based on a adapted from a book, which gives us the sort of like um, Raging Bull-esque, not Raging Bull the film, but Raging Bull the book celebrating indie film. I think this sort of like there's a nice parallel between the insider info and business of the American independent cinema of the late 70s, and this film would look into all the behind the scenes stuff. So yeah, were you surprised that such a project would A, interest Paramount, and B, be a potential directing and writing material for Affleck?
Well, I mean, Chinatown is one of the crown jewels in the Paramount catalog and the Paramount vaults. So I'm not necessarily surprised. I think this is the kind of film that, the moment they saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood become a hit, become something people flock to, I think it was a no-brainer for them. To be cynical about it, I feel like this is maybe Paramount saying, well, this is our version of that kind of era, that kind of story. But there's a lot that is unique here. I mean, The Big Goodbye. So we're talking. This project is based on the recently published The Big Goodbye, which is about the making of Chinatown and independent cinema of American cinema of the 70s. I mean, there's so many big personalities and characters in this story. We have Roman Polanski and Jack Nicholson and Faye Dunaway and screenwriter Robert Towne, legendary producer Robert Evans. I mean, just writing the script will probably be a thrill for Ben Affleck. You have so much to play with and so much to work with.
Yeah, I was kind of when I read about the project, I was kind of hoping that the actor who, I mean, it's much more of a physical trait than anything else in terms of performance. But I was hoping the actor name, and I had to write it down, is Raphael Zawaguruka, who plays Polanski in Tarantino's film. I'm kind of like hoping that he actually gets the call. I don't know how good his English is, but yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun playing the guessing game, the Dreamcast, and trying to imagine who plays Robert Evans, a legendary producer, and everybody who's seen the kid the kid stays in the pictures. Like it's such a hallmark card to yeah, just the making of movies. I found it odd that Lorne Michaels has some involvement in this as a producer. What do you think? What's the deal there?
I don't think it's anything more than just like a strange curiosity. One of those things that happens in Hollywood where, an interesting couple of people get attached to the rights of something, and this is how it all shakes out. I mean, it's odd, but I don't think he'll have any bearing on the film. I
Hmm.
think I think Ben Affleck is going to write the script that he wants to make, and Lauren Michaels will let him do his thing. But maybe Lauren, this feels like the kind of movie that lends itself to all kinds of cameos of different actors and all kinds of the personalities of Hollywood of that era. So maybe Lauren can at least help bring in the ringers who will pop on the screen for a few seconds and you know pretend to be Francis Ford Coppola or whoever knows, and then leave the movie. So yeah, I think his involvement's more just it's a curiosity, but I don't think anything to be concerned about one way or the other.
Anywho, a lot of glee on every cinephile's every cinephile is going to want to see this film. And speaking of silver screen legends, a project that we sort of forgot about ever so slightly because of the COVID situation. It was something that I had sort of like imagined that it would be a shoo-in for either Venice or TIFF, but Blonde, the fourth feature by Andrew Dominik, sort of like resurfaced and was based on a tweet by the author of the novel that he adapted for the big screen, and there's a lot of flattery there, but it also Joyce Carol Oates went out of her way to say that Dominik was had a special superpower. I'll leave it at that, and I'll let you explore that further. So, yeah, let's just dig back into Blonde, and yeah, what are your thoughts about the project, but also where it's at in the gestation period, and also perhaps Dominik and the fact that there's been a long gap between his third and this fourth feature.
Yeah, he's a filmmaker who it seems every film he makes there's some sort of mountain to push up the mountain to push up the hill.
Yeah.
Blonde is, you're right, it's one that we knew was happening and it was in production, but it's been keeping a very low profile. Sorry, I'm just trying to bring up her tweet here. But Joyce Carol Oates had some very, very positive words that seemed to have come out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, so she was able to see. She was probably one of the first audiences.
Yeah.
Part of a really select group to see the finished product, or at least something that's maybe hasn't been colorized yet, or post production.
Yeah.
But she
so
saw.
So she tweeted, "I've seen a rough cut of the adaptation, and it's startling, brilliant, very disturbing, and a very feminist interpretation. Not sure that any male director has ever achieved anything like this." So it's a very, very strong praise from the author. And it's exciting. There's not much more to add other than it certainly gives us a sense that once again, Andrew Dominik is sticking to a very singular vision, the same kind of cinematic approach, this idea of completely transforming himself with each film, from Assassination of Jesse James to Killing Them Softly, and now Blonde. And that's exciting because I think we all know what the sort of stereotypical legend of Marilyn Monroe is, but something that's going to maybe play with that a bit, maybe give us a different perspective. I'm much more curious about that and to see what that means.
Yeah, he seems to be on the same type of pacing as Jonathan Glazer. Like, takes his time and really digs deep into the research and to how he wants to approach it visually. I'm also quite shocked and by the resemblance actually between the lead actress who plays Marilyn, Ana de Armas. just the thought, I really didn't picture, but there's a couple of pictures where you see a nice resemblance. Yeah, a project that's been sort of like you said, off the radar or under the radar since July of 2019, except for a couple of paparazzi shots. There hasn't been much intel or output there. So I believe this is a Netflix project.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, so they're probably storing that one for a 2021 showing. And yeah, I was just really excited by the prospects of this film, and it's nice to be reminded by the actual writer or source. Speaking of retrofitting something for the future, James Schamus was attached to College Republicans, I believe, a couple of years back. The project was a blacklist script in 2010. It topped the list. And again, it's one of those films that revisits politicians before they became who they were. And this week it was announced that College Republicans had found a trio of actors that'll sort of like interpret real life people. And then there's also one actress that plays an amalgamation of a lot of different people in that area. So during that era. So yeah, College Republicans probably going to go into production this year and set itself up for a showing next year. So yeah, thoughts on just perhaps the production, the producing team, and sort of like this set of young actors.
Sure. I mean, this film has honestly been in development for like a decade. Long ago, like 9 years ago, Richard Linklater was attached to direct. He was gonna direct Paul Dano, who was gonna star. That fell through. A couple of years ago, Daniel Radcliffe and Dane DeHaan attached themselves, and it had John Krokaitis, who directed Kill Your Darlings. He was attached, and then that didn't happen. And so now we have James Schamus, and like for all of the long development that this film's had, I cannot think of a film that I could care about less, to be honest with you. Like I just have, especially after the past 4 years, I could really just could not care less about the story of young Republicans at this point. Like I'm not sure who this, I'm actually baffled. I'm not sure who this movie is for exactly, or what it's supposed to tell me.
Maniacal. It's for us to perhaps better understand the mindset of a Stephen Miller. So how do you get to different? How do you ascend into evilness in the White House? I'm enthusiastic. I'll be honest. I'm enthusiastic because I'm a big fan of the blacklist, especially for those like the top projects. Anything that's mentioned in the top 5, usually it's either a huge dud and tonally deaf, or hits it out of the park. And I'm always curious about the political world and all the rumblings and behind the scenes. I like Logan Lerman's very selective and picky career choices as of late. I believe he's almost a role per year average for the last 4 or 5 years. His last one was being a supporting player on Shirley. And there's also the actress who I believe comes from a modeling background, and she has a really unique face. Her name is Kristine Froseth, and she plays an amalgamation of a whole bunch of different characters, a composite, as they say. And she was featured ever so slightly in The Assistant, and we'll see her potentially break out in Sarah Dina Smith's Birds of Paradise, which was being shot in Hungary, had to stop towards the end of the COVID, and I believe restarted recently. So yeah, some young guns here that that might make it, that might give it some sex appeal to people that are sort of no longer interested in this, such as yourself.
Perhaps I just fear. You know what? My first sort of gut reaction was thinking back to Adam McKay's Vice and
Mhm.
how much I really did not like that film, and it had no nuance to it, or it just had nothing there. And my fear is this is just going to be Vice Redux. Like, I don't know. I just have very little. I already know that the Republicans are evil. How they became evil is of lesser importance to me at this point. But to your point, when blacklist scripts uh, really live up to the promise, they are something special. So, and this cast is certainly, it's all actors who are emerging out of sort of younger, more mainstream roles and trying some really different things. So there is the potential here that it could be something unique. So I'll keep a sliver of myself open to this one.
And it's worth pointing out, and this is a film that I actually quite liked, was that James Schamus's debut was Indignation. I believe I saw it at TIFF, or perhaps it was Sundance, and that also starred Logan Lerman. And I think that was a film that gave the actor a little bit more layers, and so I'm hopeful. Yeah, moving along, we have a huge, what's probably be a huge Netflix property. The YA titles are never decreasing in popularity. And this week, um, it was announced that the breakout actor of Get Out would have once again another um, um, top liner role in this project. So let's delve ever so slightly into this fantasy novel, what it represents, what kind of stakes it is for perhaps Netflix moving into this terrain, something that the Lionsgate film people are much more apt or comfortable with, and where this actor is so far in his choices, and yeah, potentially talk about the source material. It's a book that hasn't been published yet, so we have to work with the only log line available. So yeah, the upper world.
Yeah, so this is, Daniel Kaluuya is going to star in this adaptation of a YA book about, you know, about someone who can see glimpses into the past and the future, and and it goes into the future and saves someone from being shot. At least that's what I can gather from this sort of log line.
Mhm.
I think this news is fairly interesting in a couple ways. One is Daniel Kaluuya. He is, there's no doubt his star is on the rise. Just think about the filmmakers he's worked with over the past 3 years. We're talking about Denis Villeneuve, Jordan Peele, Steve McQueen. He's already earning some insane buzz just based on the trailer for Judas and the Black Messiah, which is going to come out next year, where he'll play Fred Hampton. And so this, I think, is a project that will give him an opportunity to reach maybe a Black Panther-sized audience
Uh-huh.
again.
Uh-huh.
And the thing that was most interesting to me about this project is the Hollywood Reporter earlier this month had an interview with Tendo Nagenda. He's the vice president of original films at Netflix, and when they asked him, what kind of projects are Netflix looking at right now, he said that one of the things that's their next focus is big, broad audience, PG level adventure films. Something like Jumanji or Star Wars or Harry Potter. And I feel like this is the kind of property that speaks to that niche that they're trying to fill. These sort of fantasy spectacle, something that appeals to a really, really wide audience. So I think it's a really interesting moment where you have a star on the rise and Netflix pairing him with a project that is in the wheelhouse of something they are looking to grow as part of their catalog.
Well put. The actor is also on board to produce. Um, and yeah, like you said, he's at a really interesting career juncture where, I mean, he's been acting ever since 2006, but like I said, everybody stood up and took notice with Get Out. And for him to ascend in a rather quick, rapid fashion to, I mean, what are huge studio films, says a lot about his talent. And I think this might be do a lot for Netflix and let them figure out just how they've already done the Scorsese thing and worked with known entities, and now it's interesting to see. I mean, potentially this could be a really expensive project or double project, and that's new terrain for this distributor. So yeah, there's a lot that can be said about this in terms of it being a new gamble for the streaming platform.
I think it's, the one of the things that Netflix hasn't conquered yet is they don't have a film franchise.
Mm-hmm.
For all of their steps in making these, these spectacle films, which have been coming out over the past couple of years, they still don't have a franchise to call their own, and this could be it. This could be certainly something that spawns. It seems tailor-made to spawn sequels, and if it does, I mean, again, this is like a huge opportunity for Daniel Kaluuya to really become top tier A-list star.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. What you're saying is, like, with the Chris Hemsworth film that came out this summer, and the Charlize Theron film, The Actioneer, based on a comic book project as well. I think they're starting to be hungry or to sink their teeth into the notion of wanting to have their own franchises. We'll end with, again, Scorsese was in the wheelhouse with The Irishman, and his next film is going to be delayed. So let's look at Scorsese in 2021, the implications of the project being ever so slightly delayed, and perhaps talk about his, I don't want to say favorite leading man because he has two, but Leo DiCaprio status as a production company and Appian Way and the Sony deal. So yeah, what does it mean for you that production has been delayed for close to a year?
I mean, it's a bummer, and we'll have to wait longer to see what this film is, what it turns out to be. So Killers of the Flower Moon, it was set to start in March, and then obviously, like everything else, it had to not go into production. But it looks like they're going to start a very extensive 16-week shoot in February. But it probably still means, like, I don't imagine we see this film until 2022. So again, like, it'll be a bit of a wait. But listen, whatever it takes. I mean, I'd rather the film be made safely than it just be rushed in front of cameras. So yeah, there's not much to add there, but certainly Scorsese's making the use of this downtime to do some deal making. So he's over at Apple now with a first look deal for his production banner, Kaluuya. And I'm curious what that means. I mean, what that means, does that mean, the documentaries he produces are going there? He has had one about the Canadian comedy collective SCTV in the works, which I believe is going to be on Netflix, but is that going to shift to Apple now?
Mm-hmm.
And what about the films that Scorsese puts his stamp on? Like, would that mean The Souvenir Part 2 is going to be part of the A24 Apple deal?
Ah,
Um, I don't know. Maybe it will. It'll be interesting to see how this manifests and what it means for some of the emerging filmmakers that Scorsese does get behind a couple times a year.
yeah, as we both know, he's just been collecting, attaching his name to so many docufilms. If it's not the rock and world, yeah, like factions or things that already existed in our collective memory. Ron Howard is another filmmaker that likes to dig back into our collective past. But yeah, I'm on my end, being a fan of the book. I get a sense that perhaps it's going to allow for better casting and preparation and really having the community support the project, and also having Hollywood just cast the right people, and putting Native Americans in the forefront, the way it should be in a project like this. And for DiCaprio, this deal with Appian, Way, and Sony will probably allow him to focus on 2 or 3 other larger spectacle films, perhaps just, I don't want to say north of 100 million, but something in that budget production bracket. So it's encouraging, because DiCaprio does have exquisite taste, and has sort of like the power to bring about projects, just pretty much like Brad Pitt does with Plan B, or Clooney with Smokehouse. Usually he's there's a little political tinge to it, or some deep ties to our past, and I can always appreciate what he has on the docket.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. You know, we all know DiCaprio is extraordinarily choosy. He makes like one film every couple of years, or at most. You know, he's very selective. But having this home at Sony means that, you know, the next auteur he gets behind, they also will have a place for their project and probably a budget to go with it. So it'll be interesting to see how he uses this leverage and in which filmmakers actually get that support as he develops projects, because we both know DiCaprio, he's always got a few things, you know, in the background kind of bubbling, and then it's one of them that ends up getting the green light and getting into production. But it'll be interesting to see how his future projects develop over at Sony.
Yeah, that IMDb page of films in development is beyond long, and that concludes another episode of IndieSponge. Next week is episode 20, and we'll certainly have some trade news items to go over, and it's pre-film fall film festival season. I prefer the word autumn just to make things less complicated. But yeah, I'll be seeing you, Kevin, and you guys next week. I'm Eric Lavallée. I'm editor-in-chief and site owner for IONCINEMA.com, and this is
Kevin Jagernauth, contributing writer for the playlist.
And together we are IndieSponge.